You're listening to the Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm your host, Amy Stone. This is where I will share stories from actual people about their very real lives, centering around choices, changes, challenges, and celebrations. These are stories from the individual journeys that come from what I call adulting, including wrong turns, pivots, and redirections. Why do I think that these stories matter and are worth sharing with you? Great question. Thanks for asking. Here's why. Listen, I've got some experience with this adulting gig. I've got the crow's feet and wisdom highlights to prove it. In our very modern world, we are surrounded, dare I say, bombarded with information. And I find that most of the content for adulting stories falls into one of two camps. The first is what I call the perfection illusion. You know what I'm talking about. People with perpetually perfect photos. Influencers who live like supermodels. The never-ending parties on yachts and luxury cars, or even just somehow doing a full kitchen demo and reno in 5 days. This is everyone and everything who makes the world look flawlessly polished and perpetually stress-free. This is an illusion of perfection. Then there's the second camp, the train wreck avalanche. Think reality TV, true crime dramas, daytime exposés, and overcoming all the odds and everything that could go wrong did go wrong stories. Don't get me wrong, these stories are compelling, really compelling. And I love a great underdog story of somebody who overcame everything to become a best-selling novelist or an Olympic ski jumper, or even just got the courage to try out for a televised talent show. But for most of us, neither extreme captures what our lives are really like. Our lives tend to fall somewhere in between. We have our highlight reel and we have our dark spots, but neither defines us in entirety. So my question has been, what's a regular person, a normal adult, who is just trying to figure out their next step in this one and only life that we get? Where do we turn for validation, inspiration, and motivation? Because that's the special sauce of this show. You've probably heard of Brene Brown. She's a little bit famous. She's a professor in a small state called Texas with a lot of best-selling books, a bunch of other stuff, including a really, really popular TED Talk about vulnerability. She talks a lot about the power and responsibility of sharing our personal stories. And I happen to have seen that power myself in my own life. When I share stories from my experiences, whether it's parenting, marriage, step-parenting, or just as somebody who runs and does triathlons for fun, it sometimes opens the door for others to share their experiences or their questions, and that can be an incredible ripple effect. So here's where I see the disconnect. You guys are smart. You've likely already heard all the research about why it matters to be careful who you surround yourself with, because that can act as a filter for how you perceive your own reality. That means that if the stories we hear and watch are only perfection stories and or only train wreck stories, that can be a problem because most of us are neither. But when we actually hear the stories of other people who have something in common with us, we tend to feel a lot less weird, a lot less alone, and hopefully a lot more happy. Here's another little thing about that. There's a time and place for experts. When my dad needed cardiac surgery on his heart, I wanted a very well-trained and highly credentialed surgeon. I wanted to know where they went to school, how long they'd been operating, wins and losses, all the things. For a lot of things in life, though, we aren't looking for that level of expert. What we really want is to find another person like us, but who has had a similar experience, someone who can give us the inside scoop. I call these adultier adults. So some of the guests on the show really might be people who have degrees and pedigrees and alphabet salad after their names. Love that. It's good stuff. But mostly what I want to share here are stories about experiences. To close out on an even loftier and more esteemed quote, perhaps a little bit pompous if I'm being really gritty about it. Back in 1910, Theodore Roosevelt, he was a president, was giving a speech in Paris, and he opined about the value of getting inspiration from what he called the man in the arena. Go ahead and put the man in quotation marks. See it as short for human if you want. That's perhaps not how he meant it back then, but I'm putting my spin on it for today, and I encourage you to do the same. If you aren't familiar with the quote, here's what he said. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Okay, to be fair, that's a little bit much. I feel like I might be slightly over-dramatizing the importance and the impact of my work here at Imperfect Adulting. But hey, that's the project. That's the idea. So now, are you ready? Me too. Let's do it.